are the three organs of the government. Together, they perform the functions of the government, maintain law and order, and look after the welfare of the people. The Constitution ensures that they work in the coordination with each other and maintain a balance among themselves. In a parliamentary system, executive and the legislature are the interdependent, and the legislature controls the executive, and in turn is controlled by the executive. In this chapter, we shall discuss the composition, structure, and function of the executive organs of the government. This chapter will also tell you about the changes that have occurred in recent times due to political practice. After reading this chapter, you will be able to make a distinction between the parliamentary and the presidential, executive, understand the constitutional positions of the President of India, know the composition and functioning of the Council of Ministers and the importance of the Prime Minister, and understand the importance and functioning of the administrative machinery. Now, next is what is an executive? Here, I remember somebody saying that the executive in a democracy is accountable to the people. Is that also true of executives in big companies? Aren't they called CEOs? Who are they accountable to? Now, what is an executive? Who is in charge of the administration of your school? Who takes important decisions in a school or university? In any organization, some office holder has to take decisions and implement those decisions. We call this activity administration or management. But administration requires a body at the top that will take policy decisions or the big decisions and supervise and coordinate the routine administrative functioning. You may have heard about the executives of big companies, banks, or industrial units. Every formal group has a body of those who function as the chief administrators or the executive of what organization. Some office holders decide the policy and rules and regulations, and then some office holders implement those decisions in actual day-to-day functioning of the organization. The word executive means a body of persons that look after the implementation of the rules and regulations in actual practice. In the case of government, also one body may take policy decisions and decide about rules and regulations, while the other one would be in charge of implementing those rules. The organ of the government that primarily looks after the function of implementation and administration called the executive. Hi, what are the principal function of the executive? Executive is the branch of the government that who is responsible for the implementation of laws and policies adopted by the legislature. The executive is often involved in framing of the policy. The official designation of the executive vary from country to country. Some countries have presidents while others have chancellors. हम पढ़ रहे हैं executive. The executive branch is not just about the presidents, prime ministers, and ministers. It also extends the administrative machinery, civil servants, while the heads of government and their ministers saddled with the overall रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट पॉलिसी. तो एक होते हैं परमानेंट एग्जीक्यूटिव, एक होते हैं टेम्परेरी एग्जीक्यूटिव. ठीक है. सो द गवर्नमेंट पॉलिसीज आर together known as the political executive. Those responsible for day-to-day administration are called the permanent executive. ठीक है. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है? उसके बाद नेक्स्ट जो है वो ये है, व्हाट आर द डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ एग्जीक्यूटिव. सो एवरी कंट्री मे नॉट हैव द सेम टाइप ऑफ एग्जीक्यूटिव. यू मे हैव हर्ड अबाउट द president of the USA and the Queen of England, but the power and functions of the president of the USA are very different from the powers of the president of India. Similarly, the powers of the Queen of England are different from the. This is not the topic of English grammar. This is the topic of political science. We are studying Indian Constitution at work. So here it is a topic. Its name is executive. It is the branch of government. In India, we share the power, and also there is the distribution of work. So legislature makes the laws, executive implement the laws, judiciary checks and balances all the work of legislature, executive and the other branches. ठीक है. So हाई. अब नेक्स्ट जो है, व्हाट आर द डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ एग्जीक्यूटिव्स. एवरी कंट्री मे नॉट हैव द सेम टाइप ऑफ एग्जीक्यूटिव. यू मे हैव हर्ड about the President of the USA and the Queen of the England. But the powers and functions of the President of the USA are very different from the power of the President of India. Similarly, the powers of the Queen of England are different from the powers yes, यूएसए आर वेरी डिफरेंट फ्रॉम द पावर्स ऑफ द प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ इंडिया. उसी तरीके से जो पावर है ना क्वीन ऑफ जो इंग्लैंड है उनकी पावर्स जो है वो अलग है किंग ऑफ भूटान से. बोथ इंडिया एंड फ्रांस हैव प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स. इंडिया में भी पीएम है और फ्रांस में भी पीएम है, बट देयर रोल्स, लेकिन उनका जो काम है और जो मतलब पोजीशन का नाम जो है वो पीएम प्राइम मिनिस्टर सेम है, लेकिन जो रोल है वो काम अलग अलग है, डिफरेंट फ्रॉम ईच अदर. वाई इज़ दिस सो? क्योंकि कंट्री की जो डिमांड है वो अलग अलग होती है सभी की. ठीक है, तो इंडिया में जो है बहुत सारी डाइवर्सिटी है, अलग इसका पूरा मतलब प्रोसीजर है. अब एक्टिविटी दे रखी है, प्रोक्योर अ फोटोग्राफ ऑफ द सार्क समिट मीटिंग और द मीटिंग ऑफ G7 कंट्रीज. ये इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में आप पढ़ते हो सार्क क्या होता है, G7 कंट्रीज कौन सी हैं, एंड लिस्ट दोज हु अटेंडेड द मीटिंग. कैन यू इमेजिन वाई दोज पीपल एंड नॉट सम अदर्स आर अटेंडिंग द मीटिंग्स? नाउ नेक्स्ट इज, to answer the question, we will briefly outline the nature of the executive existing in some of these countries. The USA has presidential system. USA में जो है वो क्या है, presidential system है, and executive powers are in the hands of the president. तो सारा का सारा जो presidential system में जो hands जो powers हैं वो किसके हाथ में है, president के. Canada has a parliamentary democracy. Canada में क्या है, parliamentary democracy with the constitutional monarchy where Queen Elizabeth II is the formal chief of the state and the prime minister is the head of the government. In France, both the president and the prime minister are a part of the semi-presidential system, and the president appoints the prime minister as well as the ministers, but cannot dismiss them as they are responsible to the parliament. Now, Japan has a parliamentary system with the emperors as the head of the state and the prime minister as the head of the government. Now, Italy has a parliamentary system with the president as the formal head of the state and the prime minister as the head of the government. Now, Russia has a semi-presidential system where president is the head of the state and prime minister who is appointed by the president is the head of the government. Now, Germany has parliamentary system in which president is the ceremonial head of the Germany has a parliamentary system in which president is the ceremonial head of the state and the chancellor is the head of the government. Now, in a presidential system, the president is the head of the state as well as the head of the government. In this system, the office of the president is very powerful. This is NCERT book and 11th class की book है ये. Head of the state as well as the head of the government. In this system, the office of president is very powerful, both in the theory and also in the practice. Countries with such a system include the United States, Brazil, and most nations in Latin America. Now here see types of executive. एक होता है systems based on the principles of collective leadership. एक होता है systems based on the individual leadership. तो जो पार्लियामेंट्री टाइप का एग्जीक्यूटिव होता है इसमें क्या होता है, हेड ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट इज यूजुअली नोन एज द प्राइम मिनिस्टर. ही इज द लीडर ऑफ द मेजोरिटी पार्टी इन द लेजिस्लेचर. ही इज अकाउंटेबल टू द लेजिस्लेचर एंड द हेड ऑफ द स्टेट में भी हो सकता है मोनार्क और हो सकता है प्रेसिडेंट. जो मोनार्क होता है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोनार्की और जो प्रेसिडेंट होता है पार्लियामेंट्री रिपब्लिक. ये सेरेमोनियल एग्जीक्यूटिव होते हैं. नाउ जो सेमी प्रेसिडेंशियल सिस्टम होता है इसमें क्या होता है, हैज़ द प्रेसिडेंट एज द हेड ऑफ द स्टेट, हैज़ द प्राइम मिनिस्टर एज द हेड ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट एंड पीएम एंड हिज काउंसिल आर रिस्पॉन्सिबल टू द लेजिस्लेचर. और जो पूरा ही प्रेसिडेंशियल होता है इसमें क्या होता है, president is the head of the state like Donald Trump in the USA. He is also the head of the government and the president is usually directly elected by the people and he is not accountable to the legislature. ठीक है, उसके बाद ये टाइप्स ऑफ एग्जीक्यूटिव हमने पढ़ लिया. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है, सेमी प्रेसिडेंशियल इलेक्शंस, सेमी प्रेसिडेंशियल एग्जीक्यूटिव्स इन द श्रीलंका इन 19 एग्जीक्यूटिव मतलब होता है जो मतलब लेजिस्लेचर जो लॉ बनाती है उसको जो लगवा मतलब कैसे काम करवाती हैं वो सारी के सारी चीज़ें. जैसे हमारे परमानेंट एग्जीक्यूटिव होते हैं IAS, इंडियन एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सर्विसेज ऑफिसर, जो किसी भी एक डिस्ट्रिक्ट में क्या क्या चीज़ें होनी हैं, जो भी गवर्नमेंट के रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशन होते हैं उन सबको इम्प्लीमेंट करवाते हैं. ठीक है, उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है, सेमी प्रेसिडेंशियल एग्जीक्यूटिव इन श्रीलंका. सेमी प्रेसिडेंशियल एग्जीक्यूटिव जो है वो क्या हुआ है श्रीलंका में। इन 1978 द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ऑफ श्रीलंका वाज अमेंडेड, जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है ना श्रीलंका का 1978 में अमेंड हुआ था। एंड देन द सिस्टम एग्जीक्यूटिव प्रेसिडेंसी वॉज इंट्रोड्यूस, और वहाँ पे जो सिस्टम है एग्जीक्यूटिव प्रेसिडेंसी का वो इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ था। अंडर द सिस्टम ऑफ एग्जीक्यूटिव प्रेसिडेंसी पीपल डायरेक्टली इलेक्ट द प्रेसिडेंट, तो इसमें डायरेक्ट क्या होता है, पीपल जो है वो इलेक्ट करते हैं प्रेसिडेंट को। इट मे हैपन दैट बोथ द प्रेसिडेंट एंड द प्राइम मिनिस्टर बिलोंग टू द सेम पॉलिटिकल पार्टी और द डिफरेंट पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज, ऐसा होता है। द प्रेसिडेंट हैज़ वास्ट पावर्स, हाँ जी, और सारे के सारे लॉज को लीड करने वाला, इम्प्लीमेंट करवाने वाला, देखने वाला कि कैसे क्या हो रहा है। द प्रेसिडेंट हैज़ वास्ट पावर्स अंडर द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन and the president chooses the prime minister from the party that has a majority in the parliament, though ministers must be members of the parliament, and the president has the power to remove the prime minister or ministers apart from being the elected head of the state and the commander in chief of the armed forces. The president is also the head of the government. Now elected for a term of 6 years. Hi, यहाँ पे जो है इलेक्टेड फॉर अ टर्म ऑफ 6 years, द प्रेसिडेंट कैन नॉट बी रिमूव्ड एक्सेप्ट बाय अ रेजोल्यूशन इन द पार्लियामेंट पास्ड बाय एटलीस्ट 2/3 ऑफ द टोटल नंबर ऑफ द मेंबर्स ऑफ द पार्लियामेंट। इफ इट इज पास्ड बाय नॉट लेस देन 1/2 ऑफ द टोटल नंबर ऑफ द मेंबर्स ऑफ पार्लियामेंट एंड द स्पीकर इज satisfied that such allegations merit inquiry, then the speaker can report the matter to the Supreme Court. How is the position of the president and prime minister in Sri Lanka different from India? Compare the role of the Supreme Court in the impeachment of the president in India and Sri Lanka. Now, in a parliamentary system, the prime minister is the head of the government. In most parliamentary systems, have a president or a monarch who is nominal head of the state. इन अ पार्लियामेंट्री सिस्टम में क्या होता है, प्राइम मिनिस्टर जो है वो हेड होता है गवर्नमेंट का, एंड मोस्ट पार्लियामेंट्री सिस्टम जो है उनमें क्या होता है, या तो प्रेसिडेंट होता है या मोनार्क होता है। हु इज़ द नॉमिनल हेड ऑफ द स्टेट, जो कि नाम का मुखिया होता है स्टेट का। इन सच अ सिस्टम द रोल ऑफ प्रेसिडेंट और मोनार्क इज प्राइमरली सेरेमोनियल एंड प्राइम मिनिस्टर अलॉन्ग विद द कैबिनेट wields effective power. And countries with the such system include Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom, as well as Portugal. A semi-presidential system has both a president and a prime minister, but unlike the parliamentary system, the president may possess significant day-to-day powers. My name is Preeti. In this system, it is possible that sometimes the president and the prime minister may belongs to the same party, and at times they may belong to the two different parties and thus would be opposed to each other. Countries with such a system include France, Russia, Sri Lanka, etc. Now here you can check your progress. Neha is saying it is really very simple. A country having a president has a presidential executive and one with the prime minister has a parliamentary executive. How would you explain to Neha that this is not always in the all cases? ऐसा सब केसेस में नहीं होता है। यहाँ पे देखो ये बच्चा क्या सोच रहा है, haven't we had very strong prime minister? Does it mean that even the parliamentary system is not foolproof against the personality cult? That means people and the legislatures have been constantly vigilant. I am a teacher. Now next is parliamentary executive in India. So when the Constitution of India was written, India already had some experience of running the parliamentary system. Under the Acts of 1919 and 1935, this experience had shown that in the parliamentary system, the executive can be effectively controlled by the representatives of the people. And the makers of the Indian Constitution wanted to ensure that the government would be sensitive to public expectations and would be responsible and accountable. The other alternative to the parliamentary executive was the presidential form of government. But the presidential executive puts much emphasis on the president as the chief executive and as the source of all executive power. There is always the danger of personality cult in the presidential executive. And the makers of I am from Sonipat, Haryana. The makers of the Indian Constitution wanted a government that would have a strong executive branch, but at the same time, enough safeguards should be there to check against the personality cult. In the parliamentary form, there are many mechanisms that ensure that the executive will be answerable to and controlled by the legislatures or people's representatives. So the Constitution adopted the parliamentary system of executive for the governments both at the national and state levels. यहाँ पे पूछा गया है कि जो इंडिया है उसने पार्लियामेंट्री एग्जीक्यूटिव जो है क्यों फॉलो करा। इसके लिए रिस्पॉन्सिबल है क्योंकि इंडिया जब ब्रिटेन के हिसाब से चल रहा था उस टाइम पे, जब आज़ाद नहीं हुआ था, तो उस टाइम पे भी ऐसा ही सिस्टम चल रहा था। और बाद में ये चीज़ें हैं, अकॉर्डिंग टू दिस सिस्टम देयर इज़ अ प्रेसिडेंट हु इज़ द फॉर्मल हेड ऑफ द स्टेट ऑफ द इंडिया एंड द प्राइम मिनिस्टर ऑल्सो, एंड द Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, which run the government at the national level. At the state level, the executive comprises the government and the Chief Minister and Council of Ministers. The Constitution of India vests the executive power of the Union formally in the President. In reality, the President exercises these powers through the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister, and the President is elected for a period of 5 years. But there is no direct election by the people for the office of the president. The president is elected indirectly, and this means that the president is elected not by the ordinary citizens but by the elected MLAs and MPs. This election takes place accordance with the principle of proportional representation with the single transferable vote. The president can be removed from the office only by the parliament by following the procedure for the impeachment, and this procedure requires special majority as explained in the last chapter, and the only ground for the impeachment is violation of the constitution. Now next is here power and position of the president. So article 74 ka clause 1, there shall be a council of ministers with the prime minister at the head of the aid and advise the president, who shall in the exercise of his functions acts in accordance with such advice, provided that the president may require the council of ministers to reconsider such advice, and the president shall act in the accordance with the advice tendered after such reconsiderations. Do you know what the word shall means here? It indicates that advice is binding on the president. In view of the controversy about the scope of the president's powers, a specific mention was made in the constitution by an amendment that the advice of the council of ministers will be binding on the president. By another amendment made later, it was decided that the president can ask the council of ministers to reconsider its advice but has to accept the reconsidered advice of the council of ministers. Now we have already seen the president is the formal head of the government. In this formal sense, the president has wide-ranging executive, legislative, judicial, and emergency powers. In a parliamentary system, these powers are in the reality used in a parliamentary system, these powers are in the reality used by the president only on the advice of the council of ministers. The prime minister and the council of ministers have support of the majority in the Lok Sabha, and they are the real executives. In most of these cases, the president has to follow the advice of the council of ministers. Here, Jawaharlal Nehru, ये चीज़ें दे रखी हैं. We did not give him any real power, but we have made his position one of the authority and dignity. The constitution wants to create neither a real executive nor a mere figurehead, but a head that neither reigns nor governs. It wants to create a great figurehead. इधर जो है ये क्या है, discretionary powers of the president. On the basis of the above discussion, can we infer that the president has no discretionary power under any circumstances? This will be an incorrect assessment. Constitutionally, the president has the right to be informed of all the important matters and deliberations of the council of ministers. The prime minister is obliged to furnish all the information that the president may call for. The president often writes to the prime minister and expresses his views on the matters confronting the country. उसके बाद नेक्स्ट जो है वो क्या है, इट इज़ वेरी वेल टू टॉक ऑफ द प्रेजिडेंट एज ही और शी हैज़ वुमेन एवर बिकम द प्रेजिडेंट. Now, besides this, there are at least 3 situations where the president can exercise the power using his or her own discretion. In the first place, we have already noted that the president can send back the advice given by the Council of Ministers and ask the Council to reconsider the decision. In doing this, the president acts on his or her own discretion. When the president thinks that the advice has certain flaws or legal lacunae, or that it is not in the best interests of the country, the president can ask the council to reconsider the decision. Although the council can still send back the same advice, and the president would then be bound by that advice. Such a request by the president to reconsider the decision would naturally carry a lot of weight. So this is one way in which the president can act in his own discretion. Secondly, the president also have veto power by which he can withhold or refuse to give assent to the bills others than money bill passed by the parliament. Every bill passed by the parliament goes to the president for his assent before it becomes a law. The president can send the bill back to the parliament asking it to reconsider the bill, and this veto power is limited because if the parliament passes the same bill again and send it back to the president, then the president has to give assent to that bill. However, there is no mention in the constitution about the time limit within which the president must send the bill back for the reconsideration, and this means that the president can just keep the bill pending with him without any time limit, and this gives the president an informal power to use the veto in a very effective manner, and this is sometimes referred to as pocket veto. ठीक है, अब उसके बाद नेक्स्ट यहाँ पे क्या है, वी सो दैट देर इज नो टाइम लिमिट ऑन द प्रेसिडेंट फॉर गिविंग हिज असेंट टू अ बिल. डू यू नो दैट सच अ थिंग हैज ऑलरेडी हैपेंड इन 1986? The parliament passed a bill known as Indian Post Office Amendment Bill, and this bill was widely criticized by many for it sought to curtail the freedom of the press, and the then President Gyani Jail Singh did not take any decision on this bill after his term was over. The next president, Venkat Raman, sent the bill finally back to the parliament for reconsideration. By what time the government that brought the bill before the parliament had changed and a new government was elected in 1989. And this government belonged to a different coalition and did not bring the bill back before the parliament. Thus, Jail Singh's decision to postpone giving assent to the bill effectively meant that the bill could never become a law. ठीक है, उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है क्या है, President's role in choosing the Prime Minister. After 1977, party politics in India became more competitive, and there have been many instances when no party had clear majority in the Lok Sabha. What does the President do in such situations? No political party or coalition secured majority in the elections held in March 1998. The BJP and its allies secured 251 seats, 21 short of majority. President Narayanan adopted an elaborate procedure. He asked the leader of the alliance, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, to furnish documents in support of his claim from the concerned political parties. Not stopping at this, the president also advised Vajpayee to secure a vote of the confidence within 10 days of being sworn in. यहाँ पे जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है, देन द थर्ड काइंड ऑफ डिस्क्रेशन अराइजेस मोर आउट ऑफ पॉलिटिकल circumstances. Formally, the president appoints the prime minister. Normally, in the parliamentary system, a leader who has the support of the majority in the Lok Sabha would be appointed as the prime minister, and the question of discretion would not arise. But imagine a situation when after an election, no leader has a clear majority in the Lok Sabha. Imagine further that after attempts to force alliances, 2 or 3 leaders are claiming that they have the support of the majority in the House. Now the president has to decide whom to appoint as the prime minister. In such a situation, the president has to use his own discretion in judging who really may have the support of the majority or who can actually form and run the government. Since 1989, major political changes have considerably increased the importance of the presidential office. In the 4 parliamentary elections held from 1989 to 1998, no single party or coalition attained majority in the Lok Sabha, and these situations demanded presidential intervention either in order to constitute governments or to grant a request or dissolution for the dissolution of the Lok Sabha by a prime minister who could not prove majority in the House. It may thus be said that the presidential discretion is related to the political conditions. There is a greater scope for the presidential assertiveness when the governments are not stable and coalitions occupy power. For the most part, the president is a formal power holder and ceremonial head of the nation. You may wonder, why then do we need a president? In a parliamentary system, the Council of Ministers is dependent on the support of the majority in the legislature. And this also means that the Council of Ministers may be removed at any time, and a new Council of Ministers will have to be put in the place. Such a situation requires a head of the state who has a fixed term, who may be empowered to appoint the prime minister and who may symbolically represent the entire country. This is exactly the role of the president in ordinary circumstances. Besides, when no party has a clear majority, the president has the additional responsibility of making a choice and appointing the prime minister to run the government of the country. Now the vice president of India. So the vice president is elected for the 5 years. His election method is similar to that of the president. The only difference is that members of the legislatures are not part of the electoral college. The vice president may be removed from his office by a resolution of the Rajya Sabha passed by a majority and agreed to by the Lok Sabha. The vice president acts as the ex officio chairman of the Rajya Sabha and takes over the office of the president when there is a vacancy by reasons of death, resignation, removal by the impeachment, or otherwise. The vice president acts as the president only until a new president is elected. Now, BD Zati acted as a president on the death of the Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad until a new president was elected. Now, next is here, check your progress. Imagine that the Prime Minister wants to impose president's rule in one state because the state government has failed to effectively curb atrocities against the Dalits in that state. The president has a different position. He is saying that the provision regarding the president's rule should be used only sparingly. In this situation, which of the following courses are open to the president? Tell the Prime Minister that he will not sign on the order promulgating president's rule. Dismiss the prime minister. Ask the prime minister to send CRPF to that state. Make a press statement about how the prime minister is wrong. Discuss the matters with the prime minister and try to dissuade him from taking this action, but if he insists agreeing to sign the said order. The prime minister and council of ministers. There is no council of ministers without the prime minister, and this cartoon shows how literally the prime minister leads the council of ministers. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है क्या है, यहाँ पे है ये no discussion of government or politics in India would normally take place without mentioning one office, the Prime Minister of India. Can you imagine why this is so? We have already seen earlier in this chapter that the President exercises his power only on the advice of the Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers is headed by the Prime Minister. Therefore, as head of the Council of Ministers, the Prime Minister becomes the most important functionary of the government in our country. In the parliamentary form of the executive, it is essential that the Prime Minister has the support of the majority in the Lok Sabha. This support by the majority also makes the Prime Minister very powerful, and the moment this support of the majority is lost, the Prime Minister loses the office. For many years after independence, the Congress party had the majority in the Lok Sabha and its leader would become the Prime Minister. Since 1989, there have been many occasions when no party had majority in the Lok Sabha. Various political parties have come together and formed a coalition that has majority in the House. In such a situation, a leader who is acceptable to most partners of the coalition becomes the Prime Minister. Formally, a leader who has the support of the majority is appointed by the president as the prime minister. The prime minister then decides who will be the ministers in the council of ministers. The prime minister allocates ranks and portfolios to the ministers depending upon the seniority and political importance. The ministers are given the ranks of the cabinet ministers, minister of state, or deputy minister. In the same manner, chief ministers of the state choose ministers from their own party or coalition. The prime minister and all the ministers have to be members of the parliament. If someone becomes a minister or prime minister without being an MP, such a person has to get elected to the parliament within the 6 months. ठीक है, उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट ये क्या है, नेक्स्ट जो है ये दिखा रखा है, is that all that matters, the portfolio, the house, the car, the servants, travel, the foreign trips, the security, and the secretaries, etc. Don't they mean anything to you? Now, why do people want to be ministers? This cartoon seems to suggest that it is only for the perks and status. Then why is there competition for the some portfolios? Here, there were some members in the Constituent Assembly who felt that ministers should be elected by the legislature and not selected by the Prime Minister or the Chief Minister. Swiss system under which the legislature elects the executive for a certain period is, to my mind, the best form of the government. For the provinces, the system of the single transferable vote is the best system that can be adopted for the appointment of the executive, because in that all the interests will be represented and no party in the legislature will have only occasion to feel that it is not represented. Now here Begum Ejaz Rasool और 17 July 1947 वाली बातें थी. Now next is यहाँ पे size of the Council of Ministers. So before the 91st Amendment Act 2003, the size of the Council of Ministers was determined according to the exigencies of time and requirement of the situation. But this led to very large size of the Council of Ministers. Besides, when no party had a clear majority, there was a टेम्पटेशन उधर रखी है, मैं इधर बैठी हूँ, आप इधर ले आओगे? तो हम बात कर रहे थे साइज ऑफ द काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स, ठीक है। तो अभी एक बार देख लेते हैं इसको। साइज ऑफ द काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स जो है, बिफोर द 91st अमेंडमेंट एक्ट 2003, द साइज ऑफ द काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स वाज डिटरमाइंड according to the exigencies of the time and requirement of the situation. But this led to the very large size of the council of ministers. Besides, when no party had a clear majority, there was a temptation to win over the support of the members of the parliament by giving them ministerial positions, as there was no restrictions on the number of the members of the council of ministers. This was happening in many states also. Therefore, an amendment was made that the council of ministers shall not exceed 15% of the total number of members of the house of the people or assembly in the case of the states. Now, in this chapter on the legislature, you will study in detail the various mechanisms through which the parliament controls the executive. But remember that the most important features of parliamentary executive is that the executive is routinely under the control and supervision of the legislature. The Council of Ministers is collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha, and this provision means that a ministry which loses confidence of the Lok Sabha is obliged to resign. And the principle indicates that the ministry is an executive committee of the parliament and it collectively governs on the behalf of the parliament. Collective responsibility is based on the principle of the solidarity of the cabinet. It implies that a vote of the no confidence even against a single minister leads to the resignation of the entire council of ministers. It also indicates that if the minister does not agree with the policy or decision of the cabinet, he or she must either accept the decision or resign. It is binding on all the ministers to pursue or agree to a policy for which there is collective responsibility. In India, the prime minister enjoys a preeminent place in the government, and the council of ministers cannot exist without the prime minister, and the council come into existence only after the prime minister has taken the oath of the office, and the death or resignation of the prime minister automatically brings about the dissolution of the council of ministers. But the demise, dismissal or resignation of a minister only creates a ministerial vacancy. The Prime Minister acts as a link between the Council of the Ministers on the one hand and the President as well as the Parliamentary on the other hand. It is this role of the Prime Minister which led Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru to describe him as the linchpin of the government. It is also the constitutional obligation of the Prime Minister to communicate to the President all decisions of the Council of Ministers relating to the administration of the affairs of the Union and proposals for the legislation. The Prime Minister is involved in all the crucial decisions of the government and decides on the policies of the government. Thus, the power wielded by the Prime Minister flows from various sources: control over the Council of Ministers, leadership of the Lok Sabha, command over the bureaucratic machines, access to media, projection of the personalities during elections, projections on as the national leader during the international summitry as well as the foreign visits. Here, यहाँ पे जो बच्चा है ये क्या सोच रहा है? Is it that a person becomes prime minister because he or she is a powerful, or is it that you become powerful once you have become the prime minister? सोच में है ये, थोड़ी इसकी समस्या सुलझाओ। इसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है ये क्या है? This chief minister is not happy even after the winning elections. Even after winning the confidence motion, the chief minister is not happy even after winning the confidence motion. Can you imagine why this is so? Confidence motion जीतने के बाद भी मिनिस्टर जो है हैप्पी क्यों नहीं है? क्या रीज़न है? ठीक है, CM to seek trust vote. यहाँ पे जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है? However, the power which the prime minister wields and actually puts into use depends upon the prevailing political conditions, and the positions of the prime minister and council of the ministers has been unassociable whenever a single political party has secured majority in the Lok Sabha. However, this has not been the case प्राइम मिनिस्टर जो है ये पोस्ट ही है. However, this has not been the case when government have been led by the coalitions of political parties. Since 1989, we have witnessed many coalition governments in India. 1989 के बाद तो coalition governments का ट्रेंड चल गया है इंडिया में. गठबंधन वाली सरकार, जब एक पार्टी को मेजोरिटी में वोट नहीं मिलती है तो मल्टी पार्टी जो है वो मिलके जो है सरकार बनाती है. तो फिर वो म्यूचुअल एग्रीमेंट करते हैं, उनकी कुछ चीज़ों पे कन्फ्लिक्ट भी होती है, लेकिन उनको मिलकर सरकार चलानी होती है. मैनी ऑफ दीज गवर्नमेंट्स कुड नॉट रिमेन इन द पावर फॉर द फुल टर्म ऑफ द लोकसभा. They were either removed or they resigned due to the loss of support of the majority. And these developments have affected the working of the parliamentary executive. In the first place, these developments have resulted in a growing discretionary role of the president in the selection of the prime ministers. Secondly, the coalitional nature of the Indian politics in this period has necessitated much more consultations between the political partners, leading to erosion of the prime ministerial authority. Thirdly, it also brought restrictions on the various prerogatives of the prime minister, like choosing the ministers and deciding their ranks and portfolios. Fourthly, even the policies and programs of the government cannot be decided by the prime minister alone. Political parties of different ideologies come together both as pre-poll and post-poll allies to form the government. Now, policies are framed after a lot of negotiations and compromises among the allies. In this entire process, the prime minister has to act more as a negotiator than as a leader of the government. At the state level, a similar parliamentary executive exists through with some variations. The most importantly variations is that there is a governor of the state appointed by the president on the advice of the central government. Though the chief minister, like the prime minister, is the leader of the majority party in the assembly, and the governor has more discretionary powers, however, the main principles of parliamentary system operate at the state level too. Now here check your progress. Suppose the prime minister is to select the council of ministers, what will he or she do? Select those who are experts in the various subjects. Select only those who are from his or her party. Select those who are personally loyal and dependable. Select those who are supporters of the government. Take into account the political weight of the various aspirants and choose from among them. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है, परमानेंट एग्जीक्यूटिव्स ब्यूरोक्रेसी. Who implements the decisions of the ministers? The executive organ of the government includes the prime minister, the ministers, and a large organization called the bureaucracy or the administration machinery. To underline difference between this machinery and the military service, it describes as civil service, trained and skilled officers who work as a permanent employees of the government are assigned the task of assisting the ministers in formulating policies and implementing these policies. In a democracy, the elected representatives and the ministers are in charge of the government, and the administration is under their control and supervision. In the parliamentary system, the legislature also exercises control over the administration, and the administrative officers cannot act in the violation of the policies adopted by the legislature. It is the responsibility of the ministers to retain political control over the administration. India has established professional administrative machinery. At the same time, this machinery is made politically accountable. The bureaucracy is also expected to be politically neutral. This means that the bureaucracy will not take any political position on the policy matters. In a democracy, it is always possible that a party is defeated in elections and the new government wants to opt for the new policies in the place of policies of the previous government. In such a situation, it is the responsibility of the administrative machinery to faithfully and efficiently participate in the drafting the policies and in its implementation. Hi, the Indian bureaucracy today is an enormously complex system. It consists of the all India services, state services, employees of the local government, and technical and managerial staff running public sector undertakings. Makers of our constitution were aware of the importance of the non-partisan and professional bureaucracy. They also wanted the members of the civil services or bureaucracy to be impartially selected on the basis of merit. So the Union Public Service Commission has been entrusted with the task of conducting the process of recruitment of the civil servants for the government of the India. Similarly, public service commissions are provided for the states also. Members of the public service commissions are appointed for a fixed term, and their removal or suspension is subject to a thorough inquiry made by a judge of the Supreme Court. While efficiency and merit are the norms for the recruitment, the Constitution also ensures that all sections of the society, including the weaker sections, have an opportunity to be part of the public bureaucracy. For this purpose, the Constitution has provided reservation in the jobs for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Subsequently, reservations have also been provided for the women, other backward classes, OBCs, and economically weaker sections, AWS. These provisions ensure that bureaucracy would be more representative and social inequalities will not come in the way of recruitment through the civil services. Here, Yes, I know that the officers are there to serve the people, but people are always afraid of these officers, and officers are also behave as if they were the masters. Now here, suppose the prime minister is to select the council of ministers. What will he or she do? Select those who are experts in the various subjects. Select only those who are from his or her party. Select those who are personally loyal and dependable. Select those who are supporters of the government and take into account the political weight of the various aspirants and choose from among them. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है यहाँ पे क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ सिविल सर्विसेज ऑल इंडिया सर्विसेज में इंडियन एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सर्विसेज इंडियन पुलिस सर्विसेज यहाँ पे सेंट्रल सर्विसेज में इंडियन फॉरेन सर्विस और इंडियन कस्टम सर्विस स्टेट सर्विसेज में प्रोविंशियल सिविल सर्विसेज पर्सन्स selected by the UPSC for the Indian administrative services and Indian police services constitute the backbone of the higher level bureaucracy in the states. You may know that the collector of a district is the most important officer of the government as the district level. Do you know that the collector is normally an IS officer and that the officer is governed by the service conditions laid down by the central government. An IS or IPS officer is assigned to a particular state where he or she works under the supervision of the state government. However, the IS or IPS officers are appointed by the central government and they can go back into the service of the central government, and most importantly only the central government can take disciplinary action against them. This means that the key administrative officers of the states are under the supervision and control of the central government. Apart from the IAS and the IBS officers appointed by the UPSC, and the administration of the state is looked after by the officers appointed through the state public service commissions. As we shall study later in the chapter on federalism, this feature of the bureaucracy strengthens the control of the central government over the administration of the state. The bureaucracy is an instrument through which welfare policies of the government must reach the people, but most often it is so powerful that the people are afraid of approaching a government officer. It is a common experience of the people that bureaucracy is insensitive to the demands and expectations of the ordinary citizens. Only if the democratically elected government controls the bureaucracy, some of these problems can be effectively handled. On the other hand, too much political interference turns the bureaucracy into an instrument in the hands of the politician. Though the Constitution has created independent machinery for the recruitment, many people think that there is no provision for protecting the civil servants from the political interference in the performance of their duties. It is also felt that the enough provisions are not there to ensure the accountability of the bureaucracy to the citizens. There is an expectation that measures like the right to information may make the bureaucracy a little more responsive and accountable. Here, conclusion में क्या है? The modern executive is a very powerful institution of the government. The executive enjoys great powers compared to the other organs of the government. This generates a greater need to have democratic control over the executive, and the makers of our constitution thought with the foresight that the executive must be put firmly under the regular supervision and control. And thus the parliamentary executive was chosen. Periodic elections, constitutional limits over the executive exercise of the powers, and democratic politics have ensured that executive organ cannot become unresponsive. ठीक है? So this chapter is over. In the next video, we will be discussing about the legislature. Thank you so much for watching and stay connected.